Okay. So welcome, everybody. My name is Yuri Bozzi. I'm the director of CIMeC, and I am welcoming you to this open day where we describe the structure of our research center and the structure of our master course. I will give you just a brief introduction on what CIMeC is, just to have a look to the different activities that we run at the center. We are, of course, devoted to both research and education. The major goals and focus of our research is trying to understand what we call brain architecture. I mean, what brain is, how it works in both normal and pathological condition, and by a standpoint of structure, function, and, as written here, dynamic characteristics, and how also the brain contributes to our cognitive processes. And we study this mainly study this in the human brain, but not only in the human brain. We also have several animal models to address these type of processes. Education through our master is dedicated to forge a new generation of scientists, basically, that have the interest to become interdisciplinary researchers in neuroscience and generally in brain sciences. We have some, I mean, it shouldn't be us telling what are our strengths, but I am reporting here the major highlights from a recent evaluation that we had a few years ago from an external committee that evaluated the activity of CIMeC in several years. Consider CIMeC has been founded in 2007. Okay, so we are now in our 15th year, and this committee pointed out basically 4 major strengths of our approach. First of all, interdisciplinary. As I told you, we go from the study of human brain to the brain of animal models. And in all these studies, we typically tend to have a multidisciplinary, multimodal approach to address brain function and cognitive processes. We have been always recruiting to do our studies researchers from abroad, and we are keeping in doing this. So our international level is also a plus for our activity. Our research laboratories also guarantee a translational approaches. So it is possible in some specific settings, like the Center for Neurocognitive Rehabilitation and also our neuroimaging labs. I will talk more in detail a little bit later on in this presentation. In these settings, it's possible to translate to the clinical setting what we learn in typical situations, studying the, say, normal brain. And then, of course, training of junior researchers that then leave the center and go all over the world. This contributes to spreading our vision and approach in general in the neuroscience community. We are an interdepartmental research center. We host researchers from different departments of our university, mostly the Department of Psychology and Cognitive Science, but also information engineering, computer science, biology, physics, mathematics, and the new formed, new established School of Medicine. So we are interdepartmental, and we are international because we have been, and we are, hosting people from many countries all over the world at all level of recruitment. So from principal investigators to postdoctoral fellows, PhD, and as well as master's students, okay? So I'm pretty much confident in saying that we are an international institution providing an international environment to the students that decide to study with us. Regarding the structure and the organization of education and research, you see that we have different programs in terms of both education and research. Here today, we are talking about our master course in cognitive science, but we also have a PhD program in cognitive and brain sciences, and then we have been organizing then, unfortunately, this stopped during the COVID period, a summer school together with Harvard, a very prestigious one dedicated to cognitive sciences as well. We also contribute with our teachers and principal investigators to the master course in data science, in artificial intelligence, and to the medical school that are provided by other departments and centers of our university. The research, as you see here, is structured in different type of laboratories. We have basically five big laboratories here, plus a couple of very important collaborations with institutions that are operating in Rovereto. Our laboratories you see listed here are devoted to neuroimaging, to experimental psychology, to understanding language and its interaction with cognitive processes. Animal cognition neuroscience, so where we study animal models and cognition in animals, and then the Center for Neurocognitive Rehabilitation Sharing, devoted to clinical studies and also basic research. We have a fruitful and long-standing collaboration with the Italian Institute of Technology. You will hear about this from our colleague Alessandro Gozzi, who just joined us today. And then we have other laboratories in collaboration with, for example, the Department of Physics of the University, the Fondazione Bruno Kessler, operating here in Trento, and the Fondazione Edmund Mach, as well as the Museo Civico in Rovereto. This is a little bit more in detail the different type of degrees that we contribute to. Most of our lectures are given here in this building, Palazzo Pio Marta or Palazzo dell'Istruzione here in Rovereto. As I already told you, we will be discussing about the Master in Cognitive Sciences, but we have also a PhD program, and we contribute to other master program in our university, and there is also work in progress discussing the institution, the construction of a bachelor program here at CIMeC as well. Regarding research, we have 39 research groups. So in the 15 years of activity, CIMeC has been grown a lot, starting from a bunch of researchers. Now we have a dimension which is comparable to a typical department in the university, 39 research group, again, devoted to human and animal cognitive processes and approaching these problems in a multidisciplinary perspective. So purely psychological cognitive approach, neurofunctional, neuroimaging, neurobiological approaches in animals, computational translational approaches also in the clinic. This is a relatively simple list of research areas of our researchers. You see that we cover many aspects of brain sciences. I would say something like a dozen of different areas of research, and subdivided in the 5 major sites or major groups, of research that are here identified also in this logo with different colors. You can see here that our location is a little bit so far scattered, because we have the neuroimaging lab in Mattarello, something like 20 minutes from here by car. We have 2 big laboratories, the experimental psychology and the language interaction and computation lab here in Rovereto, in Palazzo Fedegotti, on the other side of this road. The animal cognition labs are in Piazza Manifattura, again in Rovereto, and at the Trade Center in Rovereto, we have the clinical laboratories, the Center for Neurocognitive Rehabilitation. These different activities, you see, aim to approach different aspects of brain function in normal and pathological condition. At LNIF Neuroimaging Lab, we have a multimodal approach to understand how the brain works. Multimodal means that we use different experimental approaches to image the brain: magnetic resonance imaging, brain stimulation, transcranial brain stimulation, or magnetoencephalography, for example. But we also approach the mind-brain problem by a purely cognitive approach using classical experimental psychology at EPL. The CLIC group, the CLIC lab, studies the language and its interaction with the mind. And the same approach by a neurobiological standpoint is taken at the animal cognition and neuroscience laboratories, where we use behavioral, neurobiological, molecular approaches and anatomical approaches to study the complexity of cognitive processes in different species, from mice to fish to invertebrates. And finally, at Sherin, our colleagues diagnose brain disorders, mostly cognitive, language, and motor disorders, and translate this knowledge taken from patients into basic research studies as well. We have also good dissemination activities via different types of meetings, international workshops that we organize every year. Again, during the COVID, this was, of course, completely stopped, but we were able to start again with these activities, and we will start again this year. We organize colloquia and seminars with external invited speakers that come here, or when not possible, they just give their talk online. We have been organizing summer schools, and we hope to start again these type of events next year. This year, we started a new series of CIMeC seminars given by CIMeC researchers and their collaborators from Italian Institute of Technology and from Fondazione Bruno Kessler. And then we have a series of open science seminars that are aimed to discuss all the problems around issues related to open dissemination of results. Last but not least, how we see the CIMeC in future. Well, we see it, CIMeC here in the new building that is under construction in the site of Manifattura, where the animal research laboratories are already located. And this is the rendering of the new location of the neuroimaging lab that should be ready to be set up starting from this summer and completed by spring 2024. In this way, basically, we would be able to move the Mattarello site, which is far from here, down to Manifattura, and for a while keeping on our teaching activities here in Palazzo Istruzione, and the experimental psychology lab here in the other side of the road, and sharing where it is at the Trade Center. But at least with this new structure, all CIMeC will be in Rovereto area, with our researchers really close to each other. With this, I thank you for your attention, and I leave the floor to my colleagues that will go a little bit deeper into the structure of our master course. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Diro. So my name is Scott Fairhall. I'm the coordinator of a master's program here at CIMeC. And I'm going to talk firstly generally about the master's program here, talking about Okay, sorry about that. You should be able to see a bit better online now. So I'm going to begin by generally talking about the master's program here, as well as the application process. Then I'll talk more specifically about one of our 3 tracks, the cognitive neuroscience track. I thought I'd begin by fighting with the keyboard. Okay. Great. So I thought I'd begin by talking about why somebody might want to apply at CIMeC for their masters. What makes the CIMeC masters exceptional? I have 4 points for this. First of all, not only is it a top-ranked research center in Italy, but it's also a almost unique opportunity to study in Italy cognitive neurosciences in an international environment. This is not only for the points which you raised earlier, that our faculty comes from all over the world, or that the language of instruction is in English, but also because of how we arrange admission into our program. In addition to the 50 places we reserve for EU students, for people from Italy and elsewhere in Europe, we keep 30 places open for international people from outside of the EU. This creates both a wide and diverse range of perspectives and interests, as well as an interesting cultural environment in which to study. On top of that, as Yuri pointed out, we are very much an interdisciplinary center. This not only leads to a diverse range of topics which you can study and follow and do your research into, but it also creates in CIMeC an atmosphere of a modern and forward-looking view of the cognitive neurosciences. Lastly, and possibly most important, is our emphasis on research-based learning. So this emphasis on research is already manifest in the architecture of our degree. In the first year of our degree, we emphasize courses, coursework, classes, and learning the fundamentals as it relates to master's level cognitive neurosciences. In the second year, we do a hard switch where we have 2 advanced level courses, but all of the rest of the year is spent on hands-on research-based learning, which includes both your internship and your thesis. The way this is structured, in your second year, you'll spend 80% of your time doing hands-on research and investigation. This is in part possible because of the heavy emphasis on research which we have here at CIMeC. So at the moment, we have only 1 educational program, and we have 40 PIs within our group. This not just leads to an excellent PI to student ratio. For every PI, there are about 4 students for every PI. This is great, and it means that we can dedicate time to following students on their individual research progress. And it also translates into smaller class sizes, which leads to high levels of interaction and essentially more interactive and productive learning approaches. In addition to the PIs, because of our emphasis on research, there are also a lot of postdoctoral researchers as well as PhD students. And it's interactions between master's students and these early career researchers, such as PIs, such as postdocs and PhDs, which really is some of the most productive and instructive interactions you'll have in your graduate studies. And lastly, as you can hopefully see, and as Yuri alluded to before, there's a truly broad and diverse range of research interests here at CIMeC. And CIMeC really is not just nominally, it is truly an interdisciplinary center, and it is also a very interdisciplinary master's degree. We cover topics ranging from microbiology, from neurotransmitters, gene expression, to whole brain systems using brain imaging. We cover topics like the fundamental neural underpinnings of specific animal behaviors, ranging to broad, higher cognitive structures such as human conceptual representation and reasoning measured in the activity across the whole cortex. In addition to that, we combine computational models of language and perception, and we use the new developments in these areas to better understand the brain. And then we take what we learn from the brain and translate it back into these computational models so we can make them approximate and behave and be a little more like humans. And following all of these different tracks and topics, we have to bring in a broad range of tools and skills. So we cover methods like calcium imaging and neurotransmitter tagging, ranging to neuropsychology and working with patients, to brain stimulation like TMS or direct current stimulation, to neuroimaging techniques like functional MRI, magneto and electroencephalography, basic experimental psychology approaches like eye tracking, to artificial intelligence and deep neural networks. One of the standout things I think at CIMeC is I'm not aware of another center in Italy which has this diverse and broad range of skills, which is accessible to the students who follow our masters. And I think this in part leads to the success of our students when they graduate and go on with their future studies or work. So CIMeC prepares students for a research-oriented path. And the main goal, but not the exclusive, is to have our students go on to gain access into competitive PhD schools. Within Europe, this is definitely the case. Not only do we have our students going on to attend top schools like UCL or Cambridge, but they also study all around Europe. It opens up many doors and the opportunity to live and experience, have experiences in many countries. Likewise, outside of Europe. So again, we have our students go on to top schools such as Harvard and Dartmouth, but they also move to work and study all across the world. But we're not uniquely focused on research progress. We also have ex-students who move into areas outside of research. Thanks largely to the computational and analytical skills we give our students. Several students have gone on to work at the big tech companies like Google, Spotify, Facebook. And in addition to that, others have gone on to work in industry applications, neuroscience techniques, and things like that. So as you're probably aware, our degree has 3 tracks. I will speak shortly about the cognitive neuroscience track before handing over to my colleagues who will talk about the computational and theoretical modeling of language and the fundamental behavioral neuroscience track. But before I do that, I want to jump into some pragmatic details. Firstly, the application deadlines. So for non-EU students, and those outside of Italy, the deadline is coming close. It's going to be on the 10th of March in about 2 weeks. EU applicants can apply now. Applications are open and accepted. The deadline you need to be aware of is the 31st of May this year. And this deadline applies not only to EU citizens, but also non-EU citizens who are legally resident in Italy. It's critical to have a good application. We get a lot of applicants. We have to go through them, and it's very important to tailor your application to this particular position. There are 4 key elements to how we assess the applications: the grades, a reference letter, which is optional but highly, highly recommended, a CV, your CV, and the statement of purpose. The CV is probably one of the important things to focus on tailoring to the position. So in any job application process, it's important to tailor your CV to that particular position, and that applies here. So it's your time to highlight your relevant skills and experience. So the things you've done, which make you an appealing and appropriate candidate for this program, make sure they're put front and center in your CV. Please make sure to include any relevant research experience. We weight this heavily when we assess for candidates. And remember to, likewise, include any extra education you might have done. The statement of purpose is something you write yourself, and this is what you can have the most say in when you're creating your application. So write it carefully and aim to stand out. The things which we generally notice and indicate a quality candidate to us are that they're very specific about what their interests are. They're not interested in understanding the mind or the brain. Well, hopefully they are, but they have more specific sub-interests within that. So be as specific as you can about what draws you to this type of master's, what draws you to this particular track, what research areas interest you, and how has that inspired you to continue and do graduate studies in this area. On top of that, and what are your future plans? So that's another thing. What do you want to do with this master's degree once you've got it? It's also a second chance to emphasize your strengths. So if there is an element about your experience or background or studies or grades which you think are particularly appealing about you for our program, then this is a good time to yet again draw attention to those, to integrate that into your statement of purpose. Okay, lastly on the admin, I'll say a quick word about the availability of scholarships and subsidized housing. So for students coming from outside of the EU, we have fee exemptions and scholarships for subsidized housing expenses for the top candidates. This is based on the quality of your application and your grades and your ranking in the application process. Fee exemptions and scholarships, as well as housing subsidies, are also available for Italian citizens. But this is means tested, which means it's assessed, determined on your financial situation when you apply. Okay, so now changing pace a little, I'll talk about the cognitive neurosciences track, how it's set up and what our goals are within this degree. So at the core of the degree, at the center of the core of the degree, we have several courses on cognitive neuroscience and cognitive psychology. These investigate the neural underpinnings of cognitive processes such as perception, action, and other high-level cognitive focuses. They're organized into both establishment courses, which are more frontal-based, where we, together with you, cover these topics more broadly. And they evolve into more advanced courses where we focus in on specific areas. And the education style is much more interactive and student-led, where we focus on particular research papers. Students present the results, we discuss. The goal of these later courses is to not just increase your knowledge of the area, but also your analytical and critical thinking and your understanding of how to be a skeptical scientist. These 3 courses are augmented by an additional 4 courses, which first of which is the neural foundations of human behavior. So here we focus on the neurophysiological and neuroanatomical substrates of the brain. We have a course dedicated to neuroimaging, which focuses on magnetic resonance imaging, electrophysiological measures, and gives the students the fundament of what they need to know to be an effective cognitive neuroscientist. We have a course dedicated to neurolinguistics, the cognitive and neurobiological underpinnings of language. And in addition, we have the pragmatic skills which you'll need to be a successful scientist. So these include both computer programming, which is necessary to anyone coming through as a scientist in this decade, as well as courses which focus on research design and analysis, teaching you how to become a scientist and how to critically and effectively analyze the meaningfulness of the results which you attain. This core is complemented by additional courses which allow you to specialize. It allows you to become the type of cognitive neuroscientist you want to be. So these are broad in nature, but they include courses, perhaps you want to specialize in clinical neurology and neuropsychology. You want to delve more deeply into the neurophysiological aspects of neuroscience, into animal cognition, to cellular and molecular biology. They include a wide range of neuroimaging related courses where you can take the basic education you had as part of your core courses, and you can extend them out to fundamental hands-on courses, getting your hands on data, to more advanced variations of that where you learn sophisticated techniques. We can augment our skill base with transferable skills such as scientific communications, the ability to take your results and effectively communicate them to the rest of the community, mathematical skills, as well as a broad range of areas in cognitive psychology and cognitive neuroscience, ranging from neurodevelopmental courses to multi-sensory perception to the computational modeling of perception. And I'm going to circle back now to the emphasis on research-based learning, because these courses constitute 60% of your overall study. The remaining 40% is made up by the research which you yourself will be performing. This is split into an internship, which is worth 15 credits and constitutes about 375 hours of your life. And in this, you'll be part of a lab. You'll be working within a lab, gaining the skills, collecting data, analyzing data, and doing, in part, your own research. The second component of a research-based part of your degree is your thesis. This is 750 hours and 30 credits. Here, you will be performing a full amount of research. You will be exploring, designing experiments, collecting data, analyzing the data, writing up the results, and preparing these for dissemination. The reason I continue to emphasize this, the reasons are two. One is that I think while coursework is fantastic, you don't really begin to consolidate it and understand it until you apply it. So here are heavy emphasis on the application of what you've learned to a particular set of data, to a particular question, to a particular experiment, augments all of the coursework which you've done. Secondly, this is what creates standout students in terms of their career prospects. So the students of ours who've gone on to do excellent things is partly because of what they've learned in their courses. It's partly because of the excellent base of knowledge they have and their grades. But the largest component to lead you to have excellent opportunities in your future is to have good research experience, good technical skills, and a good background behind you in terms of being able to produce results. My final note is that this applies to all three tracks. So I was speaking specifically for cognitive neuroscience now, but this layout and these properties apply both to the fundamental behavioral neuroscience track and the computational track. With that, I'll say thanks, and I'll pass you over to Roberto, who will talk to you about the computational track.
Hello, hope you can hear me, especially people online. So my name is Roberto Zamparelli, and I'm here to tell you about the second of the three tracks of the program that Scott has so broadly introduced. The second track is called Computational and Theoretical Modeling of Language and Cognition, which we abbreviate in CLC. So rather than going through a course-by-course specification of the track, which you can find online, I think it's best if we try to group things in 5 categories. First of all, in this track, we will teach theoretical linguistic foundations in a generative cognitive framework. That means that students who have no competence about linguistics will learn, well, on the basic of all areas of linguistics, and especially syntax, semantics, and also linguistic skills compared to broader general cognitive abilities. So we are looking at language always with the background of other cognitive skills. There will be a number of courses that teach how to program, especially programming in Python, which is at the moment the most important language for developing artificial intelligence applications, the more widespread one. There are courses on machine learning, especially focused on natural language processing, or NLP. Okay, so machine learning applied to language. There are courses on an area that we are very interested in, that is the relation between language and vision. And we are interested in both from the standpoint of how humans do it, how humans are able to combine words and vision, and how computers do it. Because, as you know, one of the great advances in artificial intelligence recently has been the existence of programs that can actually recognize images at a nearly superhuman level in some cases. So one thing we would like to know is how these systems, which are based on convolutional neural networks, behave and how they compare to the human visual system. We then have courses that are maybe more focused on applications, and especially thanks to collaboration with the research center called FBK, Fondazione Bruno Kessler in Trento, where they typically address specific use cases, such as detecting irony from texts or detecting fake news or data preparation for training artificial systems. So people who have an applied bent can do their internship there and focus on these applications. Then we have research design, which is the same, partly the same course as that you have seen for the other track, which will teach you how to set up experiments, how to analyze the result in a critical way, how to run your statistics on them. I think that this pretty much encompasses the courses we teach in this track. So from these, it should be clear that our track sits at the center of a variety of topics. So we have the computational side, we have the theoretical side, especially linguistic theoretical. We have connections with the foundational topics in cognitive psychology and neuroscience. We have, well, this is in this case a basic introductory course. We have on the other side computational linguistics, computational models of perception, machine learning for NLP. And well, these actually are names of courses, which I don't want to go too much into, but there is also all the connections with the psychological and also the mathematical courses taught here. Remember that students have two completely free courses to take, and most of the students in our track end up taking them from other courses in other tracks offered here, although some students prefer to take them from the Department of Informatics at the University of Trento in Povo. Okay, so ... stands for other things that didn't make the slides. It's too small. We have, as Scott mentioned, a very diverse, crowd of people. So specifically in the CLC track, we have, or just had students, well, from Italy, Turkey, Greece, Russia, Iran, India, Japan, Ukraine, Canada, Mexico, and the USA. So even though you are in Italy, it's really, in a sense, you're really exposed to cultures from all over the world. Should have cared for the presentation better here. Everything should appear all at once. So the courses I mentioned connect to the research topics that we do at the CLIC group, specifically the lab where I'm in. The CLC, as the name suggests, is very much an emanation of the CLIC group. There is one letter difference. So what do we do? Well, this is actually a small sample of all the topics we are interested in, but these are all things that students can participate in as part of their internship or thesis. So we address questions like how much language can vary. We are interested in language as a human faculty. And one of the obvious questions is to what degree this faculty is, is common. So what's in common among all languages? How far can it vary? Likewise, we are interested in universal of language and special universals of semantics. For instance, what is the range of possible quantifiers that can be found in the languages of the world? But since we are especially interested in the computational side, we have to deal with the fact that nowadays you have computer systems with amazing ability at producing text. And if you open any newspaper, pretty much these days, you are deluged with information about ChatGPT and all the silly things it's doing, which are silly, but only if measured by human standards, which is something we didn't do before. I mean, it's like complaining that my robot makes a coffee which is not as good as my mother's coffee. I mean, so when you look at these models, we try to go behind the surface. For instance, we try to understand what it really knows about language, what it knows at the metalinguistic level, as you see in this, in the bottom left side. These models are also, as I mentioned, extremely good at recognizing objects, and so there are researchers here that are interested in how the recognition process goes, to what degree it is similar to the human visual cortex, and then how to best interface images with text. A lot of the training data we have in this field is images with labels, which labels that can also be actually quite complex, like a woman holding a dog in her purse while skating, something like that. So you have to recognize each of these elements in the image. How do you do it? What cases are also prone to what are called adversarial attacks, that is things that you can feed the system that will make it misrecognize it. Finally, we are interested, a lot of computational models, in fact, all of them are based on, they consume data. So they're based on data. They work so well because we have so much data these days. So one question we want is how can we obtain the best linguistic data to train our models? And in order to do that, another thing we are doing is to try to look at games. So how to use what are called games with a purpose, to have something that can be used by humans online, and which produces as a side, so it produces amusement for the players and data as a side effect. So that's another topic. CLC is part of a big consortium of universities, which has what is called an Erasmus Mundus program called LCT. That stands for Language and Communication Technologies. Together with Trento, we have people from Saarland, Groningen, Malta, Lorraine, Prague, and San Sebastian in Spain. And this is a very selective master program where students attend 1 year in one university and 1 year in another university of this group. This means that we have about 5 or 6 students from this program in class every year. They study with the student come from the normal master admission process, and I believe that is actually a great element of cross-fertilization, not to mention again the cultures they bring in and the connections. So I think it's a great resource we have here. Many of the LCT people actually are interested more, I think it's fair to, not all, but many are interested in the application of language and communication technology. So stress on technology here. And the applications are in front of everybody these days. So we have system that recognize object, as I mentioned. We have voice-based assistant like Alexa. We have a system for bots that are able to chat with you in writing in various forms, and we have translation systems. We have an enhancement to search. So this is the type of topics that are present in everyday life, and we want to sort of go behind them and try to understand what makes them tick. It's important to stress that a lot of the students that came out from this track continue to study into some PhD program. There was, at least before the Scott showed. But a lot of people also went into private research or the industry, hired or as consultants. It's important for me to stress that if your goal is to become you know, a hardcore development of machine learning model, you shouldn't apply here. We are not a computer science department. So if you really want to become a developer, a programmer, go to a computer science department. However, we can do something that many computer scientists cannot do. Okay, so we want to create what we call AI enablers, people that can develop better training sets than many computer scientists, that can evaluate the performance of AI system, that can design systems that are more brain-like, and that means more economical. We know that the brain is massively cheaper in terms of energy consumption than any artificial system there is today. And at the end of the day, system that can meet human needs. Okay, so we really believe that there is at the moment an opening for people that are not hardcore computer scientists, but work on the human side of these technologies, trying to understand their limits, how to best train them, how to best use them. So that's what we are doing here. Finally, these are the faces, some happier pictures, some less happy pictures of the people that you will see in front of you if you apply in class. And we are linguists, we are logicians, we are cognitive scientists, we are neuroscientists, we are computer scientists. To finish, here are some of the people that went through this program and moved on to better things. So we have Daniel Lowe, PhD at Harvard, Mascelloni, PhD in Australia, Cassani, AP private firm, Barbara Planck is now a professor at the University of Munich, Desi he did his PhD at Facebook, now he works in Barcelona. Adam Liska actually is no longer at Spotify, is now at what's it called? Not OpenAI, the other DeepMind, thanks, is at DeepMind. Laura Princisvalle is still at Google. So she went directly without even a PhD from the master to Google. And I think that that's it. I'll pass to my colleague for the third track. Thanks for the attention. Right. This. Research done for spoken language, where it comes from, how it works. Yeah, maybe we can take all the questions together at the end. I mean, the short answer is yes, but we will tell you more at the end. Okay. Yep. Is it still connected? I don't see the. Yeah. This one.
So hello everyone, I'm Uwe Meyer. So I'm going to introduce you to the fundamental behavioral neuroscience track. And first of all, Any idea why I can switch? You had the same problem. Okay, perfect. So fundamental behavior neuroscience, right? On one side, we have the brain. On the other side, we have the behavior. What is behavioral neuroscience? Yes, it's exactly this, to understand on one side how brain controls the behavior. And how can we study this? We can manipulate a little bit of the brain and look what is the output to the behavior. Or on the other hand, we can do something to the behavior and see what happens to the brain. So this is basically the behavioral neuroscience. So where this fundamental comes from, if you look at what kind of species are used actually in neuroscience, here's kind of a table. This is published papers in percentage, and then you can see any kind of animals, and you can see here the humans. Of course, we study humans quite a lot. I guess it's for some sort of egocentric interest that we really want to understand who we are, where we come from. And we also study quite a lot of rats and mice. It's basically for a very similar reason. Brains actually underwent an evolution, and there are some conserved structures in all vertebrates. So if we focus here in rats and mice on some conserved structures, we can use them as models to understand what happens in a human brain. Because in a human, we cannot do so much, right? So it's not a very good animal model. And only nowadays, we start to have more non-invasive techniques to take a look inside. So rats and mice became very useful to study quite a lot of fundamental aspects of brain functions, and in particular also disease-oriented research. So what is all the rest? This is where the fundamental comes into play. And this is actually the curiosity of how other animals with brains use their brains and for what, and how is evolution shaping the brain. And in fact, you need to compare different brains in order to understand the fundamental architecture, like we said in the beginning, or the structure of the brain, and how is it changing in the evolution, what is changing. Just to give you an example, for instance, if you are a human, you are a tetrapod, right? You have 4 legs, okay, 2 hands, 2 legs. With the frontal hands, what you are doing, you can grasp things and you can kind of sophisticatedly control it. If you now take a look at the birds, what you will have instead of having heads, you will have wings. And what they are doing actually by manipulating objects, they're using their beak. So that means that it needs to be fundamentally somehow, it has to impact the shape of the brain. So the brain regions that control this kind of grasping are completely different. And this is what makes it so interesting to study also how brains function in other animals. And this is where the fundamental is really interesting. Fundamental sooner or later becomes also applicational very often. This is something that we cannot predict. We study for curiosity, but sooner or later, all of this becomes part of application. If we understand how something works, we find also something that we may adjust in order to make our life more comfortable. This is what humans do quite a lot, actually, right? We adjust everything to how we like it, that is surrounding us, without sometimes knowing even what's around us. So this is another table with something similar, but divided by different categories, and it's mammalian space, so mammals used in neuroscience. Neuroscience, here we have rats, mice, other rodents, cats, dogs, primates, and so on. So you can see again also here neuroscience, quite a lot of rats and mice, a little bit of primates. When it comes to physiology, and this is like, let's leave the organ brain out and let's take a look at the whole body structure and the functions in particular, the physiology is a function. We see that primates are barely studied here. And this is like quite interesting that most of the things that we know about the human body were studied in animals. It started historically, we could not dissect anatomy of a human body and so on. And so actually quite a lot of medical researchers were investigating in the past also the physiology of animals. So in fact, many questions are not addressable in humans that we can address in animals. Okay. So the fundamental behavior neuroscience track is centered on animal in neurosciences, okay? So if you are really interested to look how something is different than in humans, then this is a track for you. And we use different animal models. This is just few animal models that we have in our labs. So we have mice, people working on this, usually disease-oriented behavior and brain in wild type and also genetically manipulated. This is a very important subject you can that is very well established, so you get a lot of genetical tools for genetic manipulation. This is the standard model basically for this, but we have also chicks, so birds. I hope in future also more species of birds. Chick is a very important developmental model. As you can see, it's a very newly hatched chick, so we don't study the adult ones. It's the ones that are hatching directly, and we can study innate behaviors and so on. We have different species of fish, and we also have some people working with insects, trying to study a more simpler system. Yep. So the question is basically, what is the neural base of sensory cognitive functions in animals that we want to address? And we have these different methods that have been mentioned already multiple times. This is just a little bit visualized. So we have behavioral measurements. We have somewhere anatomical staining procedures to stain either brain activities or things like this. This is a three-dimensional representation of not three-dimensional, but it's a scan of olfactory bulb in bees. This is a hippocampus of a mouse, for instance. This is three-dimensional reconstruction of the olfactory glomerulus. Electrophysiology, so we can in animals inject electrodes directly in the brains and measure electrical potentials, because brains work, of course, through bioelectricity, right? So we can measure action potentials or low field potentials, which are more similar to what is measured in MEG. So, so we have kind of a lot of approaches, and we can also use MRI, like in this case, to reconstruct three-dimensional. This is a three-dimensional representation of a chicken brain. Okay, and so this is the sorry. This is the core of the degree is centered on one side on animal cognition and neuroscience, which is giving you 9 credits. The other compulsory course is brain development and disease. So these 2 aspects you will get as a core. This is surrounded by foundation of cognitive psychology and neuroscience, neural foundations of human behavior, neurolinguistics, and also this computer programming, MATLAB, and research design was already introduced. This goes through the tracks. And it's also very important because you will not survive science anymore without handling at least some sort of computational abilities. This is still kind of superficial programming languages that everyone can learn. So you should not be scared of this. It's actually an advantage. And the data is becoming incredibly complicated. You think you're a biologist, but then you study behavior and you have all these complexities in the track animal, and maybe with some artificial intelligence and machine learning. Some people prefer to call better machine learning than artificial intelligence, but you get a lot of data, and the data is becoming more and more. And the only way to handle it is through programming. And you don't need to write everything. You just need to learn how to copy and paste and connect them. So no worries about it. So I don't want to say if you want to learn programming, you should. Like, I'm just saying, but if you don't want, you will survive too. No worries. Yes, then you can add it. We kind of clustered them, but it's kind of artificial clustering here. You can do whatever you want with this, but you can basically specialize on more these fundamental aspects like comparative neuroanatomy and foundation, or in evolution, sorry, cellular molecular neuroscience and invertebrate neurosciences. So mostly just really fundamental behavioral neuroscience, or you can go a little bit back into clinical neurology, neuropsychology, and brain connectivity and neuroscience. In the end, your degree is in psychology, right? So with specialization and neuroscience, so you cover it. If you go to our track and you study a little bit of animals, it doesn't mean that you cannot come back in psychology. Okay, this is all some people probably do not really understand. It's basically you can follow interest for some time. You can still specialize in different directions. And free choice courses should not be underestimated. Again, you can modify this track according to your interest, like in all tracks, taking also course from the other tracks. So yes, FPN students learn also from psychologists, neuroscientists, neurobiologists, physicists, and the goal is to gain excellent knowledge on neural underpinnings of basic sensory and cognitive functions in healthy animals and in animal models of clinical conditions. You will get introduction to up-to-date methods used in modern behavioral neuroscience, including data recording and analysis. And the aim is also to develop critical thinking and scientific communication skills, and to become simply able to conceive original scientifically sound experiments. So thank you.
Okay, so next we're going to hear from Roberto Bottini, who unfortunately is feeling a bit sick, so he will be joining us by Zoom. Roberto, if you want to turn your camera on and share screen, we can check that works.
Hi everyone. I cannot share my screen for some reason. I think the host disabled participant screen sharing.
Try now. Prova adesso.
No.
Prova adesso.
Oh, right. Yes, now I can. Can you see the screen? Does it move? Yes, it moves. Okay. Good. Thanks a lot. Thanks for the colleagues that spoke before me. I'm Roberto Bottini. I'm sorry that I cannot be there in presence, but yeah, as Scott says, I'm a bit sick. But I will be there in the Zoom room for the Q&A afterwards, if you like, if you have some questions specific to what I'm going to introduce, which is the joint graduate program, a joint master program between CIMeC, UnityN, and the International School of Advanced Studies, which in Italian goes for the acronym CISA, which is located in Trieste, which is not too far away from Trento. So both CISA and CIMeC are two renowned research center in cognitive neuroscience in Italy, and participating to this program, to this joint program, it's a very good thing because these two research centers are complementary in many ways. And if you participate to this program, you can have the best of the two worlds. It's a competitive program, so only 4 students among the students that have been selected for the master course in cognitive neuroscience would be selected for this program. And the selection process takes place at the end of the first semester. So basically, right now, we are selecting the students that will go to CISA next September. The core idea of the program is to develop a research project across the 2 centers, and to obtain, you will obtain a joint supervision from one principal investigator at CIMeC and another principal investigator at CISA. Importantly, the selected students will get some economic benefit. So you will get a scholarship, actually more than one to some extent, that will support your stay in Trieste and in Trento. And the program is divided in 2 years. In the first year, you will spend it in CIMeC, in Rovereto/Trento, and you will follow all the classes. The second year, you will go to CISA in Trieste. So again, first year in CIMeC, you will follow exams as the other master students, so nothing changes for you. Then at the beginning of the year or in the middle of the year, then at the end of the first semester, that depends, it will be a presentation of the joint program, CISA-CIMeC. Then at the end of the first semester, there will be a selection, which is based on your CV, based on a motivation letter, and also on your achievements during the first semester in the master at CIMeC. And then if you are selected for the joint master at the end of the first years, usually at the beginning of summer in June, we will go with the 4 selected students for a lab tour at CISA, where you will meet faculties, students, postdocs there. And you could have a direct approach, a direct experience of the different labs, and that will help you to decide what exactly to do in your second year at CISA. Why that? Because your second year would be mostly dedicated to your thesis and internship. As Scott was saying before, 80% of your time also in the master at CIMeC in the second year is dedicated to the internship and thesis. That's the same at CISA. And also you will have the possibility to follow some of the courses at the PhD level offered by CISA. And that's it. As I was saying before, CISA is definitely, together with CIMeC, one of the best cognitive neuroscience institution in Italy. The topics that are researched, investigated there are various, and it goes from human cognitive neuroscience to psycholinguistics and neurolinguistics to system neuroscience in animal model, rodents, for instance, mostly rodents. And there are also 2 labs of computational cognitive neuroscience. You can find more information about the labs, which are 7, and the respective PIs in the CISA website. And if you need some more information about the program, you can check the UnityN website dedicated to that. You can Google CISA cognitive neuroscience and you will find all the information about CISA, and if you have some specific question, you can contact me. Sorry, thanks a lot for your attention, and good luck for your application.
Thank you, Roberto. Next, we have Alessandro Gozzi, who's going to talk about our other research partner, IIT.
All right, so can you hear me? Yeah. So good afternoon, my name is Alessandro Gozzi, and I'm a researcher as well as a coordinator of the Center for Neuroscience. Just stopping here, just to make sure. All right, so yeah, I was going to say I'm a scientist here with the local center from the IIT network. I'll explain in a little while what the IIT is. And yeah, in the next 5 minutes or so, I'll just try to explain what we do and who we are and what opportunities there are for you should you just embrace this course. Now, how do you open it here? All right, so just a few words about the Italian Institute of Technology. So basically, we are an institute that encompasses a headquarter institute, which is located in Genoa, and a number of satellites, like the one here in Rovereto, that have a strong partnership with the host university. And clearly, in our case, in the center here in Rovereto, the host university is CIMeC and University of Trento. And through this partnership, you can build a stronger research. We can share instruments and, have like a larger technological platform. And as you can imagine, also by the name of the institute, our focus is strongly on technology or applied technology to better understand cognitive functions and neurobiology underpinnings of behavior. And as I said, so here we have a center. The center is physically located in 2 different buildings. We have a couple of PIs basically that are doing like human-oriented research, and their labs are currently here at Palazzo Federigotti, nearby here. And there's another set of labs that are instead located at new buildings at Manifattura. Professor Bozzi explained at the beginning the location of this new center. All right, so I'll try to take you through quickly to some of the research we do here, just for you to get a feel for the technologies we have, also the research themes, okay? So as mentioned, this is just like a summary of our center. It was established in 2010. Now it hosts pretty much as many as 60 researchers or so. The focus is on system neuroscience and computational neuroscience. And we have 4 core research lines, which I'll very briefly illustrate with our corresponding PIs here. And we also have an adjunct researcher, Lorella Battelli, who has got an outstation at Harvard Medical School. So very briefly, I'll touch upon some of the activities in the lab. So the first lab I'm going to illustrate is called LAN, so Laboratory for Autism and Neurodevelopment Disorders. And it is headed by Professor Michael Lombardo. He's an American researcher who joined us 3 years ago. And Mike's research focus is mostly on understanding, decomposing the heterogeneity of autism. As you probably know, autism is a wide spectrum of disorders that are very heterogeneous. And so Mike has been developing this approach that is aimed at splitting up autism into autisms, okay? And the ultimate goal here is to go towards precision medicine, the idea to identify biological homogeneous groups of patients that are then amenable, for example, to specialized treatment, right? Individualized treatment. And to do that, Mike has developed a very interesting approach that is aimed at identifying these different, autisms that occur at different levels, basically going hierarchically from the genome, which you can see here at the bottom of this representation, up to the phenome. Quick example to translate this into something more practical that you can grasp. So this is just a recent example from Mike's work. And for example, Mike is really has been following up with a lot of research on this concept here, the idea that there are these two main kinds of autism that can be identified very precociously. So basically, toddlers that are diagnosed with autism can be differentiated based on their early language outcome. So basically the criterion here that it uses whether they have poor or good early language outcome. And what Mike demonstrated is that these two groups are behaviorally and developmentally distinct. And what's very important and what's been following up with a lot of research here in Rovereto is the neurobiological underpinnings of this. So Mike uses fMRI, he uses genomics and a number of complementary techniques that are really state of the art to understand this sort of profiling. So plenty of training opportunities here on this specific niche of understanding the complexity of brain disorders at different levels. Second lab is my own lab. It's called Functional Neuroimaging Lab. And what we study here mostly is the functional connectome. You might have heard of this idea, right? The functional connectome, it's a representation of the connections of a brain and the way they somehow transfer information within each other. Okay, so this is a different layer on top of the structural connectome, and understanding what the functional connectome is and how it is organized across species is very important, because if you learn, the basic principle, we can, or these basic principles, we can understand how the brain integrates information, how the brain processes information, and how these different areas contribute collectively to underlying complex tasks, right, that are at the basis of our behavior. And to do that, well, another thing I wanted to add is that we are interested in understanding the functional connectome both in healthy states, but also in disease, so-called functional connectopathy. And this is really a prominent aspect of many brain disorders, autism for one, but many others. To do that, we have developed this I would say, unique, perhaps, approach that bridges research across species, for example, using fMRI in humans and animals. Plus, we have a number of investigational models also in animals that can also provide a lot of opportunities for training. And to give you an idea of the impact that this work is having, for example, just you remember I told you that autisms can be split into different autisms, and this is something that can be exquisitely seen in using this approach, for example, in different mouse models that recapitulate genetic mutations associated to autism. You can see that the connectome here in these images can be disrupted in different ways. So this is one way of understanding the underpinnings of these interbrain communications and also its disruption in brain disorders. Another lab that is was most recently established is Giuliano Iurilli's lab. It's called Laboratory for System Neurobiology. And Giuliano's quest is to try and understand and unravel how motivational states shape the interaction between the brain and the world. And to do that, Giuliano has developed, once again, in terms of technology, a very interesting and cutting edge approach. So basically, Giuliano is using, is mapping behavior in animals, of course, in virtual environments. So Giuliano is using really virtual reality to dynamically see how the behavior of the mouse is unraveling, so to speak, in this new environment. And what he does at the same time, so concurrently with behavior, Giuliano basically maps high density neuronal recordings. And when I say high density, both in space and in time, he uses this recording to generate models that then he tests using optogenetics. So basically like some sort of like overwriting the code to understand whether the predictive model is in fact effective or not. So we have this closed loop between like experimental, cutting edge experimental neuroscience, say a more theoretician angle, and the applied demonstration of whether the model works or not, that is really unique. And once again, plenty of training opportunities in this lab as well. And finally, we have we are going to have, because it is not here yet, as of September, a novel lab, a new PI. His name is Federico Rossi. The name of his lab is Neurocircuit and Synaptic Architecture Lab. And the main research question of Federico is to understand basically the architecture of visual-motor integration, which is clearly a big problem, has been there for many years. There are many approaches there that can be used. Just once again, to emphasize the focus on technology we have in the lab, I'm just highlighting some of the methods that Federico has been using in his legacy lab and then is planning on implementing here at the Manufactura space. Federico will be implementing the viral tracings with calcium imaging at the single neuron resolution, but he plans also to go beyond. And you can see in the central panel here, he plans to go beyond single cell resolution. He has demonstrated the ability of map neurotransmitter release at the synaptic level on a single dendrite. So here we can really have a beautiful merging of scale. So pretty much unprecedented, I have to say. And this is once again a prime example of cutting edge methods that are here, that are also available and that offer a lot of training opportunities. And as I said before, there's also an outstation, so to speak, whereas Lorella Battelli's lab, who has part of her lab here and the largest part of her lab at Harvard Medical School. And Lorella's lab is called HUBS, Human Behavior and Brain Stimulation, and he has a strong focus on brain stimulation, so along two main lines of research. First one is brain plasticity. She uses TMS and other neuromodulatory methods to understand how cortical activity reconfigures plastically, okay, in healthy conditions. And the second line of research is a little bit more translational, and it is aimed at using these methods to restore impaired brain function, for example, in visual neglect after stroke or cortical blindness. And this is the research that is carried out at Harvard. So once again, there's a possibility of being involved in this sort of training program somehow, and perhaps also spend time in beautiful Boston. So that's pretty much it. So clearly there are multiple training opportunities. I emphasize the technology here because our institute is technology, but technology is not like, implemented, deployed per se, but we, in our case, of course, in each of these labs, there are main research questions that I hope I just gave you a bit of a flavor of. Well, there's also PhD position that we know after the master, but many master students actually get very excited by the research that we do here at IIT and CIMeC, and I decided to pursue a PhD later on. So that's also an interesting thing. And if you're interested in any of these research programs or you want to know more, you can find us on the web, name.sarname@iit.it. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Alessandro. So now we're going to move on to the general question and answer section. We'll take answers online. If you want to ask your questions via chat, we'll go through those, and also people in the room. Following this, in case I forget, those online are invited to To join me in a Zoom room, we can have a face-to-face chat and you can ask specific questions afterwards. People who are here in presence, the coffee break will start when we finish the question and answers here, and the faculty will go downstairs so you can corner them, ask them any questions you might have on a one-to-one basis. For the faculty, there's some microphones live up here. So if we get a question which relates to one of you, you can run up. Okay, why don't we start by jumping to Roberto's question from before. So to repeat it, is there any research done for spoken language? And how does it work? Where does it come from?
So, well, first of all, linguistics is sort of traditionally interested in spoken language, but it so happens that when you collect linguistic data, most of them come from written language because that's a lot of the data these days are scraped from the web. In terms of production of spoken language, in the past, we did not work on this specific topic, but at the moment, one of the project that is opening in my lab is this web game that I mentioned before. And this web game is designed to collect oral data, which represent the mapping between intonation and meaning. So people are basically challenged to be actors in a game, and they're given different context and they have to change their intonation to adapt it to the context. And this way, when it will be fully functional, we hope to collect a large range of intonation patterns in different languages, which can then be used to train spoken language systems, but also to understand a little better how the mapping goes from language to language.
Okay, are there any questions from the room? Yep. Wait, I have to come over to you with a microphone if I can't hear you online.
Hello, you said before that you don't become an hardcore programmer, but how strong is the programming part in your track?
So there is a introductory Python course, although there are of course many people that arrive here and already know how to program. So there is, we have always, I think this is true for the whole master, the entrance level is quite diverse. So the first thing we try to do is to bring everyone to the same level, okay? So that's where the Python class enters. Then there are two machine learning courses, one in the second semester, first year, and one I think in the second year, introductory and advanced. So at the end of the advanced, you can definitely write your models. But this, as I mentioned, is not, I mean, you will still be behind what people learn to do in at DISI, at the computer science department, because they do a lot more than this, of course. But you do have two full course of machine learning.
Okay, may I do another question? Okay, okay, I study computer science, and how about the biology, neuroscience part of the track? Like in percentage, how is like divided in like informatics and neurobiological things?
Are you asking about which track? Because the CLC, we don't do much biology, although you can take a biology course if you want as one of the free exams, but it's maybe you want to ask Uwe?
No, I actually would like to ask you okay, maybe not biology, but the neuroscience part, like, is it more focused on neurobiology or in neuroscience or in like computer science?
So I think that within my track, the only neuroscience course that you can take are, I mean, I guess that Roberto Bottini course, yes, does have some neuroscience. But if your interest is primarily neuroscience, probably you will be more oriented toward the cognitive neuroscience track than mine, which also has computational aspects. One difference, for instance, is that they tend to gravitate around MATLAB, whereas in our group, we study Python.
Well, thank you.
I'll just add to that answer by one thing is the machine learning courses we teach. 2 of our faculty actually come from informatics, come from computer science. And the instructors you'll have for these courses are experts in programming who will be able to take you to the higher levels that you want to. And finally, a lot of the people who come out of the CLC track, like it's not, Roberto is very clearly showing how you should not be intimidated if you don't consider yourself to be an exceptional programmer. But some of the people who do come out of that program are really exceptional programmers. And the opportunity to really develop your skills in that area comes from a research component, comes from a project you work on in your second year. So there's a fair bit of scope there. Yeah, and I'll just double up on what Roberto said about there is a good component of cognitive neuroscience in the CLC track, but you do have these 2 extra courses where you can take whatever you want. So you can do molecular and biology if you want to as part of your more neuroscience thing. Okay, I'll jump back online. So this is in terms of, this really relates, it's a good question actually in terms of the application process. So I might get this a little wrong because I don't have our table in front of me, but the question is, I have a degree in speech therapy. Can I apply for admission? So we often get this question. We do not exclude anyone from applying from any different degree. So it does not matter what degree you have, you're still eligible to apply. The philosophy for this is we actually like to have a diverse range of people come in. On the other hand, if everyone is coming from a diverse background, it makes it very hard to teach everyone the same topic. So what we do is we penalize people who come from a different background. There are 20 points out of 100 from your degree. If you come from something traditional, cognitive psychology, some kind of neuroscience degree, you will get 20 or maybe 15 points. You get the full marks of this. As you move away from that, as you go from psychology to biology, physics, right down to, I'm trying to think, to music studies. So if you come from if you have a bachelor's degree in fine arts and music, you can still apply. You will get a 0 in this section of our assessment. That means that if you have exceptional grades, if you have exceptional motivation, then you have a very good chance of getting into the program. Well, you still have a chance of getting into the program. And that's worked really well for us in the last 2 or 3 years. So we have a diverse range of backgrounds. The people coming from a more diverse backgrounds are those who have a high scholastic aptitude. They're better at organizing themselves and doing the extra work to keep on track. So they manage to keep up with the program and they add to it. I hope that answered your question. Okay, any more questions in the room? I have one more online, which I'm going to have to try and read. Okay, so this is about BCI. This is, yeah, so the person is from a data science background. They have quite a good level of computational skills, we can assume. They're interested in looking at brain-computer interfaces, and they're wondering if CLC is the best track to do that in. And it's a tricky answer. I mean, we have a lot of people who are interested and go on to do future work on BCI. Most of them, I think, come out of a more cognitive neuroscience track, and that would be one route you could go. You could augment what you would gain in those courses by following the more advanced computationally based CLC tracks. The issue there is most of the more advanced ones, which really focus on the programming, are more geared towards natural language processing. While at the same time, we have specific courses which look at how we can use essentially data science, deep neural networks to better model and understand the brain within CLC. To answer it shortly, I can't be precise. I think you could either go through the CN track, the cognitive neuroscience track, or the CLC track, being very selective in the kind of more optional courses you use and really focusing on your research and supervisor. But both those tracks, I think, would allow you to get into that field. The trick is finding the right supervisor, either here at CISA or at IIT, who could really follow you into that research goal. Okay, so I think we're done with the questions. Those guys who are, oh. Jesus. Oh, scrolling. Okay, maybe I'll speed run this a bit more. So Katharina, Katharina, I kind of indirectly answered your questions before. So you're coming from a business economics background. That is not going to help you in the application process. You're going to be partially penalized for that. But if you have strong grades, if you write an excellent statement of purpose and have fantastic references, then you still have a fighting chance of getting in. So having a higher maths knowledge, we actually opened a course 2 years ago. Sorry, so this is Narek. Coming from a linguistics background and not having a strong background in maths, we actually opened a course to teach maths for people in exactly your situation. So we have a, I'm blanking on the name right now, but there's a course you can follow in your first year, which will help you gain the mathematical skills you need to be able to follow the rest of the course. Elisa, yeah, what's the course called? Yeah, I think it's like mathematics for computational. We can leave it for now, but yeah, there's definitely this course. Okay, Spettatore asks, well, the anonymous spectator asks, how difficult is it to live in Rovereto, Trento, knowing no Italian? So I can speak to this firsthand. I can tell you it's much harder living in.
No, it's easy.
Yeah, it is easy. I came to Italy living in Rome. This is challenging if you don't speak any Italian. Trento is quite an international part of Italy. The university gives you the support you need. There's mechanisms in place to help students, but most of all, the student body. Your cohorts, who will be, let's say, about 60% Italian, 40% foreign, you form a natural kind of group which helps each other out. So I would say, with confidence, it's challenging, of course, but it's a good kind of challenge. So the last question, I better double check it. Yes, is on Coursera. We don't directly, so we do not take into account certification from Coursera. We've looked at this in the past. One of the issues is that you can follow the course for free, but then to get the certification, you have to pay it. So most of the people we had following this route would acknowledging that they'd, not acknowledging, professing that they'd attended the course, but they didn't get the official certification. Having said that, we do unofficially consider it in terms of if in your statement of purpose or you put it in your CV and you are coming from, I think, a linguistics background, you're coming from a non-traditional background and you've taken particular courses in areas more connected to the master's degree, then we do consider that, but not directly if it's not an officially accredited course you followed.